In accordance with the earlier resolution, the House will now consider the paper petition signed by 10,000 or more persons listed on the business paper, which is requesting the Legislative Assembly repeal the amendments to the State Environment Planning Policy, Planning Systems 2021, so that the 227 hectares of land in the Northern Beaches is no longer subject to the Development Delivery Plan. The petition was lodged by the member for Wakehurst. The question is that the House take note of the petition, and I call the member for Wakehurst. I should just acknowledge the guests in the gallery.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Firstly, thank you to the over 12,000 residents who signed this petition. They want this chamber to hear a clear message. Precious bushland on the Northern Beaches should be protected for future generations. In fact, everywhere, let's be honest. The petition before the House calls on the New South Wales Government to repeal the Development Delivery Plan for the Northern Beaches developed in the previous term of government. This plan puts over 200 hectares of local bushland on a trajectory towards being cleared for housing and industrial uses. The two largest sites proposed for development are the 135 hectare site at Ralston Avenue in Belrose and the 71 hectare site at Morgan Road, also in Belrose, affectionately known by locals as Lizard Rock, for the large rock-like shape, like a lizard's head on Morgan Road. So Lizard Rock is the first cab off the rank slated for development. In recent weeks, a planning proposal to rezone the Lizard Rock site for a subdivision of at least 450 dwellings has passed through the gateway stage with the New South Wales Department of Planning. The next stage for the rezoning proposal is a more detailed assessment as well as public exhibition period. This consultation has not yet started, but I can tell you right now, the development of the site does not have the support of the local community or indeed its local council, and for good reason. The proposal for a massive housing subdivision clearing over 45 football fields of native vegetation in this location is completely inappropriate. And I will briefly outline just some of the reasons why. Firstly, the biodiversity values of the site. The Lizard Rock site adjoins Garrigal National Park, Narrabeen Lagoon State Park, and forms part of a wildlife corridor across private and public land. Lizard Rock provides habitats for iconic species of Australian wildlife, from powerful owls to red-crowned toadlets through to spotted-tailed quolls and bandicoots. It's a place where observant locals have spotted a male lyrebird dancing his mating dance and a mother wallaby unloading her joeys from the pouch for their first bounces. It is home to black cockatoos, which I spotted with Dr. Sophie Sconce when we were there one morning. Australia has committed to reversing biodiversity loss by 2030 and conserving 30% of Australia's land areas by 2030. How can we achieve these goals if we continue to clear bushland at this scale as though it were worthless? Secondly, the bushfire risk of developing the site. Surrounded by bushland and with constrained evacuation routes, the Northern Beaches Council states, in its current form, the proposed development presents an unacceptable and, in some cases, a catastrophic risk to future residents. Have we learnt nothing from the 2019 bushfires and subsequent inquiry and Royal Commission? We have to stop building homes where we know we will expose lives to danger and where we will put the lives of RFS and SES volunteers in danger protecting them. Thirdly, the inconsistency with the strategic planning. The Lizard Rock proposal and the Development Delivery Plan are totally disconnected from the agreed strategic planning currently being undertaken to deliver more housing in Frenchs Forest and Brookvale. The Lizard Rock proposal would create a car-centric enclave unserviced by public transport. The cities and towns we need to be creating are ones connected to social infrastructure and public transport, which make effective use of our urban land rather than sprawling into new greenfield areas. This is entirely consistent with the government's own messaging in recent weeks about moving away from low-density greenfield housing development. One member of the Sydney North Planning Panel, Annalise Tour, recognised the compelling reasons that rezoning should not proceed. When she opposed the planning proposal, she cited that concerns that it did not demonstrate site-specific merit about the extent and nature of the proposed R2 zoning area, and that the proposal did not adequately respond to environmental and other constraints on the site. And I want to be clear that I support the intent of the Aboriginal Land Rights Act and appreciate the importance of enabling First Nations people to achieve economic self-determination through developing land. But we should consider all proposals on their merits regardless of the landowner, and this proposal does not stack up. The community recognises that this land was granted by state government to the Metro Land Council in recognition of past wrongs committed against First Nations people by governments of the past. The community does not criticise the desire of the Land Council to want to improve the economic circumstances of its members, given the structural disadvantage faced by Indigenous people as a consequence of colonisation. However, the community's concern is that we are now committing wrongs against wrongs, trying to fix the past wrongs against First Nations people by committing new wrongs against nature. We have to work harder and smarter to find solutions able to provide a win-win for both nature and society, and this petition calls for this balance to be struck. The community has ideas for finding a win-win solution that both delivers the Land Council a fair and timely income from its land holdings, whilst also retaining the bushland. The state government could lease the land as a new national park, could compensate the Land Council for the loss of development potential, or offer a land swap for a development site elsewhere. The petition does not dictate a particular solution, as we recognise that the Land Council has to be part of any new decision making through this petition. The community is asking the state government to be an active partner in finding that solution. And I want to thank the Northern Beaches Bushland Guardians who spent their months collecting these signatures and informing the community. Finally, the Bushland Guardians are Dr Connie Harris, Councillor Kristen Glanville, Rachel Lee Jackson, Sarah Baker, Pamela Dawes, Deb Harris, Marion Kiss and Sue Denham, and thank the many groups and individuals in our community who have worked hard to build momentum to conserve our local bushland. Love your work.
The question is that the House take note of the petition. Not technically in order. Okay, we'll just let it go this time. Okay.
Speaker.
After that, I'm going to throw the member for Wakehurst out. Okay. I call the member for Pittwater.
Mr Speaker, I thank the Bushland Guardians and all petitioners in bringing this important matter to the attention of this Parliament. For me, Morgan and Oxford Falls roads have always been known as Lizard Rock Road, and for all long-term Northern Beaches locals, this is the case. For some years on council, I didn't really know what was going on when they were talking about Morgan Road and Oxford Falls Road because I'd always known it by another name. Lizard Rock is an historic landmark representative of tens of thousands of years of Indigenous history, but it's also part of the memory and lives of many in our community today, including those in the gallery. If Lizard Rock itself is the jewel, the surrounding bushland and wildlife is surely the crown. What brings us here today is a proposal to develop the sites around Lizard Rock. If approved, this would see 450 dwellings approved in that area. I now turn to some, but not all, of the issues posed by this development, and I thank the member for Wakehurst for his contribution in relation to some of those issues. First, the loss of pristine bushland and wildlife habitat. This development sees 45 football fields of vegetation demolished and with it, native habitat destroyed, potentially many species put at risk. In Pittwater, our community value the protection of our local environment. To wantonly destroy such precious nature is inconsistent with the will of my community, and I will always represent Pittwater's interests. We must fight this proposal. 2. Bushfire risk. Bounded by Garrigal and Ku-ring-gai Chase National Parks and the Narrabeen Lagoon State Park, Pittwater is especially vulnerable to the risk of bushfire. Having borne witness on the front line to the horrors of the 2019-20 Black Summer bushfires as a volunteer firefighter, it would be an abrogation of my duty as a representative and volunteer to allow this proposal to be contemplated without reference to my lived experience of the risks of bushfire. Having considered the bushfire expert reports prepared by the developer and by council, I am convinced that this development will put people, wildlife and property at catastrophic risk of death and destruction. We must fight this proposal. 3. Infrastructure. There must be adequate infrastructure and services before any development. Whilst this proposal seeks approval for 450 dwellings, as a former councillor, we've all seen this movie before and we all know the ending is horrible. We know that developers will be approved for 450 lots, and we know that once that approval is granted, we will see attempts to use state environmental planning policies to densify development. 450 lots could become 900 to 1,800 seniors living units, or 450 lots could become boarding houses with thousands of residents. Now, the Gateway determination tries to prevent this, but do any of you in the gallery, having seen this all before, really believe this cannot and will not be worked around? All in all, we could see thousands more cars on our roads and thousands of new residents for which there is not sufficient school space, open space, sports fields, bus services, health services, roads and more. And I do note that from mid-July, our bus timetable on the Northern Beaches is to be reduced. The development simply does not generate the revenue required to build and invest in infrastructure and services required to accommodate the growth proposed. We must fight this proposal. Environment, bushfire risk and infrastructure are only some of the issues posed. We agree that we need more housing stock and that the only sensible place for such development is around heavy transport nodes, train lines, light rail and metro stations. We agree that landowners ought to be able to deal with their land in accordance with law and that the Land Council are entitled to seek to use their land. We agree that government should find a way to protect this land and protect the Land Council's interests as owners. We also agree that residents can advocate against developments which they do not support. And we also agree that this development can be stopped by the current development. Now, as much as we seek to work in good faith and with goodwill, it would be naive to think that Lizard Rock development is not a political issue, because it is. It is with shame, in my view, that this government and its minister approved the progress of this proposal. The minister had authority to refuse to progress the proposal to Gateway, but the minister did not. Now, don't be misled. The progress of Lizard Rock was not a decision of unelected bureaucrats. Ministers delegate their authority to those bureaucrats, which they do not have to. In March 23, the Liberal Party committed to ending Lizard Rock, and it would have ended. Only a party of government will have the power, or the ministers in office who can make these decisions to protect our communities, and sadly, with the current government, we're now at greater risk. This proposal will progress, but we must continue the fight, and I thank every single person for being here today to show the minister, who I know will hear you, that your voice will be heard, and it is my hope that we can defeat this proposal. Thank you.
Call the member for Davidson.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Well, to 12,262 people that signed the petition, thank you for getting involved in democracy. Petitions, particularly in this place, I think are a really important part of our democracy. And can I say it was a really great initiative that the O'Farrell government actually brought in 2011, that if there was a petition with over 10,000 people, that it actually get debated in this House. And so can I say congratulations in particular to the Northern Beaches Bushland Guardians for receiving well over 10,000 names signing this petition. And I'd like to acknowledge the Northern Beaches Bushland Guardians, in particular Connie, Kristen, Pam, Sarah, Rachel, Deb, Marion and Sue. And it's against the standing orders to clap, but I will not interject.
Sorry, I missed that.
Stop the clock.
Oh, I did not interject. Mr Speaker, it was very appropriate that the member for Wakehurst tabled this petition. Many of you may know Lizard Rock and the surrounding area was once part of the Davidson electorate, and a redistribution that took place at the last election moved that part into the Wakehurst electorate. And for many of you who are asking who should definitely table the petition, it is absolutely appropriate that the member for Wakehurst did, that it is now in that electorate. I have met with the Northern Beaches Bushland Guardians on several occasions, and in particular, my favourite event, not to discriminate, was the Rock for Lizard Rock. And that was a really wonderful event that took place before the election, but it was a really wonderful opportunity for the community to come together and to agree that we think that certainly what is proposed we don't support. And I would like to just make some remarks on this. I think the first thing I'd like to say is that all of us do support property rights. I said that in my inaugural speech, that as a Liberal I do support that. But of course, in a society that we do have proper processes when it comes to planning. And what is really important in those processes is that we make sure there is no corruption risk. And that is really important. I want to highlight that. But having said all of that, planning always needs to have proper community consultation. And all of us deserve to have our say on that matter. Certainly when it comes to the electorate of Davidson, what I love most about the Davidson community, and a former colleague of mine who was a member of this place, said that there will come a time where you fall in love with your electorate. And I have fallen in love with the Davidson electorate, and it is because of the natural beauty of the electorate. And I know that all of you here in the gallery, you certainly do know that we live in just such a wonderful part of Sydney. And I would like to acknowledge particularly my colleagues that are here today, in particular the member for Wakehurst, the member for Manly and the member for Pittwater. And I also acknowledge that we have the Minister for Planning Public Spaces here, and that is very important. I think that he as the Minister can hear that. One thing I will pay tribute to as well is my predecessor, the member for Davidson, in Jonathan O'Dea. Now, Jonathan O'Dea was very much an advocate who was against this proposal, and in fact made several submissions and spoke in this place regarding his opposition. And on this, he did say, quote, "Many constituents have contacted my electorate office with concerns that land in the current SEP amendment being considered for potential development is not at all suitable for proposed residential or industrial services and development." He goes on and writes, "The serious and persistent threat of bushfire at the sites proposed for possible residential and industrial service development," and continues, "The plateau is unique with the number of threatened and endangered species." Now, as the member for Pittwater was getting to, the Liberal government at the time went to the last election with a firm and solid commitment. And it said that if we were re-elected, quote, "The Minister for Planning, Anthony Roberts, said concerns raised by the community in relation to bushfires, critical infrastructure and density mean that a re-elected Perrottet government will not allow the rezoning application to proceed." And I'm very proud that it took my fellow candidate colleagues, and I'd like to acknowledge, of course, the member for Pittwater and member for Manly, but also Toby Williams, who was not successful, that we were able to advocate for this to the then Premier Perrottet. So I hope that the Minister who is here today does take that. We did go to an election with that, despite not successful, that he does take that on note. Thank you.
I think the member for Davidson, question is that the House takes note of the petition, and I call the member for Manly.
Thank you, Speaker, and I want to begin by taking this opportunity to thank the member for Wakehurst for bringing forward this petition, and in doing so, I want to also thank the Northern Beaches Bushland Guardians, in particular Connie Harris. Connie, thank you for not recruiting Mum too aggressively to your cause, because she's only chewed my ear off a little bit about this particular issue. But in saying that, I also want to acknowledge and thank the member for Davidson for his contribution, and also the member for Pittwater, who I know has been an advocate for this issue. But importantly, I also want to thank the Minister for coming here, for sitting in the chamber, and for listening to the concerns that these members have raised on behalf of their community and the some 12,000 people that sit behind this petition. Thank you. What this petition does is really articulate and aerate a number of complex issues. First Nation rights, biodiversity and conservation, environmental preservation, density, and the topic of the month and ongoing months, I'm sure, which is housing affordability, which is something that we are acutely aware of on the Northern Beaches. And so then how do you effectively navigate an issue such as this, which combines all of those complex issues, and a petition such as this highlights the significant community concern, because it is no small feat to drive 12,000 signatures. And we saw Connie, Kristen and others, whether it was in Manly beachfront, right up the peninsula, collecting those petition signatures along the way with the support of the members that we have here. But it's true that members of Parliament really live or die in reflecting and representing the wishes of their community. And so it's been good to have heard from these members, and in particular the member for Wakehurst get up, and the member for Pittwater, who has stood strong on this issue for so long, to share the concerns of the community. I think that the member for Wakehurst and Pittwater have also articulated what seemed to be a reasonable pathway forward. whether that be a land swap or rental income or other. But what is clear is that there is a consistent and shared view that not only our community but the members that represent it are willing to work with all stakeholders and come to you, Minister, in the hope that ultimately a pathway can be worked forward that respects the First Nations right and the role and responsibility of Metro Land Council, but at the same time recognises the complexity, the preciousness of the ecosystem and the environment around Lizard Rock, and also seeks to deal with the other issues that we have around housing affordability and density. At the end of the day, I thank the member for Wakehurst, member for Pittwater, member for Davidson, and equally to you, Minister, thank you for coming and hearing the concerns of this community today. Speaker.
I thank the member for Manly. Did the member for Manly say his mother was here? No. So I wanted to talk to her. I wanted to speak to her. Okay. The question is that the House take note of the petition. There's no further speakers for that. I'll go and call the Minister.
Thank you, Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Wakehurst for bringing forward this petition. Thank those in the gallery for coming along today, and thank all of those who signed the petition, along with the member for Pittwater, Davidson, and Manly for their contributions. Look, there are strong views about this proposal. Of that, there can be no doubt. And I appreciate the depth of feeling that members of the community have, and who, it has become apparent, were deliberately misled during the election campaign by the previous government about what hadn't happened for local political gain. For the record, the opposition, and I was the shadow minister at the time, I believe the previous government had stepped in as well, only to find out on taking the reins of the portfolio that in fact nothing like that had happened. It was a statement from a media advisor in a paper, nothing more. The planning proposal that this debate refers to is a proposal from the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council to rezone land for residential development. It has a long history. From October 2022 to now, there have been a number of occasions where proponents were informed that their proposal could proceed to the next stage if certain conditions were met. Understandably, they are as frustrated about how we got here today as others are. To clarify exactly where this planning proposal is up to, the Department of Planning and Environment issued a gateway determination with a number of conditions on the 9th of June this year. A period of 3 months has been set for these conditions to be incorporated into a proposal for a minimum 30-day public exhibition. There are a further 40-day working day period must be provided for 15 authorities to consider the proposal. These include Transport for New South Wales SES, Rural Fire Service, EPA, and the New South Wales Commonwealth Departments for the Environment and Sydney Water. Progression of the proposal now lies with the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council. And I note, and this will be of interest to those in the gallery, that objections from the New South Wales Rural Fire Service would mean the proposal could not progress. Now, following a public exhibition, which given the interest here today, I encourage you all to become part and parcel of, that is the process of planning. The independent Northern Beaches Strategic Planning Panel will hold a public meeting to hear from submission makers before making a recommendation for how the proposal should be finalised. The member for Manly succinctly summed up all the issues that land use planning must take into account. And the final authority to determine if and how this land is to be rezoned will sit with me or my delegate, and the final determination will be based on the advice received following the conclusion of the assessment. Now, I understand, and the member for Wakehurst has approached me directly about that. I've spoken to him about this issue on several occasions. I've also spoken to the member for McKellar about it. I understand that there may be a desire to have some other arrangement entered into. That must have the agreement of the proponent, but it also should not come with a cost to government and a wish of government that it cannot meet in the current fiscal environment. Become involved in the process, engage in the process, and that's the way planning proposals in this state should be assessed and considered.
Thank you, Minister. I call the member for Wakehurst in reply.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Petitioning is an age-old tactic with an impressive history across many important social movements, but remains powerful today. Petitioning is an important accountability and democratic feature of the workings of this chamber, and it provides an avenue for the community to organise demonstrate public sentiment, and if they meet the threshold of 10,000 signatures, to have a dedicated debate and hear a response direct from the relevant minister. And so the minister didn't have a choice but to come and speak today. However, we're still very grateful for his time. We're still grateful for his time and engagement with the issue, and yes, we have met several times, as you mentioned, and we will look for a way forward that doesn't involve housing on this site. I appreciate that the minister can only work with the situation he's inherited, but let's work together to find a smart solution. I want to thank the members for Pittwater, for Davidson and Manly for their contributions to the debate today, and the Speaker. Northern Beaches residents were rightly dismayed by how the former government handled the issue. However, these members have today represented their constituents well in speaking to the petition. Thank you, gentlemen. I note the announcement from the Coalition during the election campaign that they would stop the rezoning proposal. That's testament to the effective public pressure, but it was too little too late. But regardless, the advocacy from the members for Pittwater, Davidson and Manly on this issue is and continues to be much appreciated. And I again want to thank the Bushland Guardians, who are all here in the audience today, and everyone who signed that petition. A huge thank you to you. And I want to thank the Northern Beaches councillors and the staff, because at every opportunity, including their excellent submission to the rezoning proposal, the Northern Beaches councillors provided expert evidence and analysis explaining why this is the wrong development in the wrong place. It's very unfortunate they have been ignored. In closing, I simply say that we must find a long-term solution to protect Lizard Rock and surrounding bushland in perpetuity. This is a top priority for myself and for the people of Wakehurst, the Northern Beaches, and it should be for this state. Thank you.
The question now is that the House take note of the petition. All of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The debate on the 10,000 signature petition having concluded, I thank the guests in the gallery who I didn't hear a peep out of. Who sat there and listened to their local representatives and the minister. I thank you for joining in this important part of the political discourse. Thank you very much.